Juniors, I'd like to present just a very small tidbit that comes from the Folgers Library. And many of you may not know that the Folger Shakespeare Library is in the United States. And when the Folgers dedicated this library to DC, they also talked about how to preserve their holdings on the bard, and the bard, of course, is another name for a poet, and that would include Shakespeare and all of his work. So if you've never had a visit to the Folger Library, if you're down in DC, it's very close to all of the Capitol buildings, and it is a nice walk, and it is a beautifully preserved building, and they often feature a tremendous amount of instructional materials. But this particular Macbeth feature that I'd like to talk about has to do with our our national history of slavery, and also it has to do a little bit with the notion of how America and the stain of slavery connects to the bloodbath that occurs in Macbeth. So, in that scene from Shakespeare's Macbeth, Lady Macbeth gives us the physical manifestation of being unable to wash the blood from her hands. And she makes desperate attempts, of course, to scrub her hands clean of what to us is invisible, but on her hands, of course, because she is involved in the murder of King Duncan and his cohorts, his assistants, his protectors. She cannot wash the blood stain from her hands in her involvement in the murders committed by both her and her husband. So, one of the famous lines that is used in Macbeth is, "Out, damn it, Spot, out, I say." And of course, by this point, she is also going mentally insane. She can't sleep. And her gentlewoman, which is her lady in waiting, which takes care of her needs, and then a doctor there are secretly observing, what will these hands ne'er be clean? In other words, there's no way to undo the murder once it's occurred. Now, what was interesting about all this is there is a 19th century ink drawing and a political cartoon which takes Lady Macbeth's famous lines. And when you look at this cartoon and you see how it is designed, certain parts of it are labeled according to Lady Macbeth. And one of those things that we notice is that it is the American context of the Civil War. So the artist and the date of the drawing, although we don't know, but it is one of many items in the Folger collection that show Shakespeare's words and scenes being used for political and social commentary. So what we have here is Lady Macbeth, and we have her like looks like she's over a sink, and in the figure of the Columbia. Now, if you don't know what the Columbia is, that is one of our statues that represents that you often see on, like, let's say, Lady Liberty, and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and download the whole image so we can get a good look at it. And I think it will let us share. I'm hoping that you guys can see that. So the image, I'm gonna share another screen so I can stop presenting that, and I can go ahead and present the other image. So this tab gives us a better look at the entire image. So I'm going to go ahead and share that, and then we'll look at it a little more closely. So what you see on this is Columbia, and you notice that obviously Lady Macbeth with the long hair and the particular dress. And if you notice here, the word slavery is attached to or directed at her hands. And if you look very carefully right here, you see the word Lincoln above this bearded man. And I'm not sure what they were trying to say there. But let me look. That is President Abraham Lincoln and Horace Greeley. So you can see that the image is what we would call a sketch a sketch for a political cartoon. Now, another thing too about the drawing is that the Greeley was an influential newspaper editor and publisher, and he pushed Lincoln to take action on the emancipation during the Civil War. and his newspaper was called the New York Tribune. It was printed a letter from Greeley to Lincoln called the Prayer of 20 Millions. That was on August 20th, 1862. So he was urging Lincoln to fully implement the Confiscation Act that would emancipate any slaves from rebel states who came within Union lines. But he also called for Lincoln to make clear a stand against slavery and in the institution. So it's interesting that when we are taking a look at American history, that we would see a political cartoon come up and try to connect some of the power within Lady Macbeth's inability to wash the blood from her hands, and calling the blood on Lady Macbeth's hands slavery gives us a strong indication about how difficult it would be for the American country, the newly founded American country, would be to wash away the stain of slavery. So, little known fact that Shakespeare pops up in many ways and shows up in various places where educated people who have some sense of Shakespeare's words can directly apply them to the political issue of the day.